everyone, my name is Derek and welcome to the Netflix Knowhow, the review show here to help you stop browsing and start watching. Today we have Schitt's Creek. Schitt's Creek. Schitt's Creek. Thank you, it's not a bad word, Jesus fucking Christ. Schitt's Creek is about a wealthy aristocratic family that loses everything they have and has to slum it with the rest of us.
Now the story of a wealthy family who lost everything.
Not that family. The story focuses on the Rose family, who is a wealthy family that ends up losing everything to a corrupt banker, and then they have to end up moving to a town called Schitt's Creek, which is actually a town that the father of the family purchased as a joke for his son a long time ago, and it's the only thing that they have left after everything is foreclosed on by the bank. So on paper, yes, Schitt's Creek does bear a lot of striking similarities to Arrested Development, but when you watch the show and when you compare the two, they're actually very different, and they take a very different approach to how they tell their stories and how they develop their characters. Whereas Arrested Development is a very over-the-top, high-energy, and goofy type of show, Schitt's Creek is actually a much more deadpan and reserved type of show. So we'll start off with the Rose family, who is led by Johnny Rose and is played by the always awesome and always fantastic comedic master Eugene Levy. Johnny Rose is very much the relatable working man of the family, and you can tell that he has come from very humble beginnings and he worked for every penny that he has, so he understands the value of hard work. Or at least he did until he ended up getting really rich, and so he's sort of forgotten that humbleness and that charm, and now that they moved to this tiny little town where everyone is just very poor and very like homely, I guess you could say, it's kind of like a shock to him, but he fits in a lot better than the rest of his family because he came from those humble beginnings. He just can't quite remember them. Johnny Rose is also the character that really tries to put things in perspective for the rest of his family. So while everyone else is complaining about how awful this whole situation is, he's the one that's saying, you know what, it's not that bad, let's try to make the best of it. Even if he's constantly running into snags because he's still very much stuck in that wealthy lifestyle that he used to live in. Moira Rose, played by Catherine O'Hara, is very much the opposite to Johnny Rose. She's played by Catherine O'Hara, who is a fantastic casting choice for this, probably the best casting choice in the whole show, and she is just the biggest drama queen on the planet, and she is the definition of vanity incarnate. Her character is very much supposed to be a parody of the sort of like aloof, wealthy Hollywood liberal type because, you know, she's very progressive and very liberal in her ways, but not because it's the right thing to do, but because it makes her look good. It makes her look like a good person to the public. She's all about preserving her image and living this lavish, fabulous lifestyle, and so putting her in this dinky little town with all these like redneck type people is just, she's so out of place, and she hates every moment of it. You can just tell, like, she has this little eye twitch. She's just always losing her mind being stuck in this town and its awful poorness. David Rose is their son, and he is played by Daniel Levy, who is, yes, Eugene Levy's real son. David is very much Captain Sassy Pants. He is the sassiest, most sarcastic person in the show, and he will judge you just based on the type of pants that you were wearing. He'll just give you a look like, no. Like, that's who he is, and he's so funny. He's always judging everybody. He's always looking down on people because he's very particular in his ways, and he doesn't like being taken out of his comfort zone. Annie Murphy plays their daughter, Alexis Rose, who is about as shallow as a kiddie pool and about as dumb as a sea cucumber. She is very much the stereotypical dumb, shallow blonde, and she is kind of like a parody of that Valley girl. She's just like very like aloof and just kind of like dumb and stupid and really shallow. She's just, everything about her is very surface level. She also holds the title for saying David's name the best of anyone in the show.
David.
Woof, David.
So a lot of the driving force and the conflict and the humor of the show comes from the fact that you have this very rich, or formerly rich, I guess, super dysfunctional family that kind of hates being around each other, and they're forced into this tiny rinky-dink little podunk town, and they're just so far out of their element, and they're forced to be together, and they hate each other. They hate every moment of it, and it's so funny and it's great. And because the show is very sort of deadpan and reserved, it doesn't play up these like big comedic moments. A lot of the best parts just come from the small details in the way that the family interacts with each other and the way that they interact with their characters, even down to just the simple facial expressions that they make. Now, it is very hard to outdo Eugene Levy in a deadpan mugging contest, but Annie Murphy, the actress who plays Alexis, she manages to do it. She gives some of the best facial expressions in the show. I mean, let me just show you this example. I don't need to explain the context, but you can understand what is going on just based on her facial expressions.
Wow. Wow. Wowee.
Now, as for the locals of the town, we have Roland Schitt, played by Chris Elliot, who is the mayor of the town, and he is the like most ignorant, most oblivious, most insufferable slimeball redneck person you can possibly make. I mean, he's terrible. Not like a terrible person per se, he's just not someone you really want to be around. He doesn't understand personal boundaries, he doesn't know bubbles, he's very, very defensive and self-absorbed. He's kind of almost like the Rose family themselves, but like the redneck version of it. Opposite him is his wife, Jocelyn Schitt, played by Jennifer Robertson, and she is the polar opposite of who Roland is. She is just the nicest, sweetest, most smiley neighbor that you will ever know. She's kind to everybody, you can't help but love her, and she's gorgeous on top of that, which makes it even funnier because there's like this running joke in the show that Roland, who's this like slimy, gross, kind of fat, like rugged, greasy dude, and he's married to this like beautiful, super nice, awesome woman. It just makes no sense, but they love each other. Like, she loves him even though he gets on his nerves sometimes. It's so hilarious. Their dynamic is just so funny. Emily Hampshire plays Stevie Budd, who is the woman who runs the motel that the Rose family is staying at, and she does not give a flying kind of like how I didn't give a about censoring my mouth when I said the word She has this really funny, just like over it attitude. She can't stand this town, she can't stand the motel, she can't stand the Rose family, and one of her greatest joys is just messing with them all the time. And she actually does end up creating this very strong bond and friendship with David Rose, which is funny. I think it's mostly based on the fact that she just loves messing with him because he gets so tilted whenever she just messes with him. It's so hilarious. There's also Twyla Sands, played by Sarah Levy, who is, yes, Eugene Levy's daughter and Daniel Levy's sister. Twyla is the waitress at the local cafe, the only cafe from what I'm aware of this town, and she is so sad and kind of adorable. She's like a really sad little puppy dog with just those puppy dog eyes, and she just wants to be loved, but everyone just kind of finds her annoying and dumb. I think it's really sad, but it's really funny. There is also the local veterinarian Ted Mullins, played by Dustin Milligan. Now let's talk about Ted for a minute, because Ted is actually one of my favorite characters in the show. So in the first season, Ted is introduced as kind of like this blonde, rich, pretty boy, and he really only serves to kind of showcase Alexis's shallowness because, you know, Alexis starts dating him, and the reason she's dating him is not really because he's a good guy, it's because he's one of the few people in the town that actually has money and can offer her sort of that lavish lifestyle that she is used to. Now, this is not to say that Ted is a bad guy. He's kind of a non-character in the sense that he's just kind of like this goody two-shoes, really nice dude that wants to date Alexis because he finds her nice and fun and everything. But he's kind of boring in the first season because he's really only there to sort of help develop Alexis's character. But fast forward to season 2, and Ted comes back. Basically what they end up doing is they end up turning Ted into like this like studly hunk man. He's kind of a badass. Not in like a very traditional way, but he's just like a really awesome, attractive dude. And it's funny because by this point, Alexis and Ted have since broken up. But now all of a sudden he's like way more desirable than he was before, because on top of being attractive and wealthy, he's just a great guy. Like, he has an awesome personality. I just really like what they did with his character, because they sort of took this character that was was really honestly too good for Alexis to begin with because she was really just using him for his money and his status. And then they turned him into a character that was like really way too good for Alexis. And then it gives Alexis a reason to have to like grow and change as a person so that she can be worthy of this Ted guy. It's such a brilliant turn for this character. I love what they did with him. Now, the reason I spent all this time talking about the characters so thoroughly is because the characters really are the backbone of the show. And I know you can say that about any sort of narrative story or anything like that, but here, like, that's the show. It is these characters, and like, that's it. That's all it is. There is absolutely nothing flashy about the show. It's very low budget. There's no flashy effects. There's no background music. There's, you know, not these big set pieces or anything. It's just a very, very simple show about these characters, and that's what the entire focus of the show is on. Because of this, that means there is a very strong emphasis on strong character development, on good relationships and character dynamics, and it results in very strong writing. There are currently 3 seasons of the show available on Netflix right now, and with the exception of 1, maybe 2 characters I can think of, there aren't any other characters introduced to the show. It's just this main cast, and we spend the whole time focusing on them. It allows us to really get to know these characters well and to see them develop and grow over the course of the show. On top of that, each season has its own sort of overarching theme of where they are in terms of their progression as characters and their development in the community and the town of Schitt's Creek, and I really like the way that it's handled over each season. So season 1 is the first season, and that's where they initially lose all their money and they have to move to the town of Schitt's Creek. And this is all about them sort of transitioning from being this rich, wealthy family into just being like poor people like the rest of us. And it's mostly a lot of setup. This is where we have to introduce the characters, this is where we have to introduce the town, so we're learning just a lot of things for the first time, and so a lot of it is sort of just like preliminary stuff to get things going. It is probably the weakest season just because it showcases the Rose family at their most vain and unlikable because they're still transitioning. They just got knocked out of their rich lifestyle. And so we get to see them like right at this lowest point of them where they are just their most unlikable. On top of that, the show hadn't quite figured out its tone and its humor yet. It was still funny, it had some kinks to work out. It wasn't quite as polished and as funny as later seasons ended up becoming. It does still have its funny moments, and I think it does a very good job of establishing the town and the characters and just sort of the atmosphere and feel of the show overall. Season 2 is about the Rose family coming to terms and accepting their plot in life. So this takes place about a year after they initially moved to the town, and they're starting to sort of settle in and become a little more established in the community, and they're starting to realize that, you know, maybe this town and the people aren't quite as bad as they thought. It's nice because it's the season where the Rose family starts to realize that these people that they're stuck with in this town, they're people too. I mean, they might not be rich, they might not be the most sophisticated people, but they're still genuinely good, nice people, and they have taken care of them. This season also features the best season finale of any of the seasons. It's just a really upbeat, warm ender that it brings the family together as a family, and it also sort of brings them into the community, and you see them having fun and enjoying themselves and enjoying the people that they have come to know. Season 3 is about the family starting to give back to the community. This is the season where the Rose family has been established in this community and this town for a while now, and they're starting to actively want to get involved with it and to like put things into it to make it better. You know, this is their home now, this is where they live, and so they're trying to make a life of it. David starts his own business, Johnny helps Stevie with managing the hotel, Moira actually ends up running for town council and she gets elected, and then Alexis goes back to high school and she gets her degree. This is the season that really starts to show their transformation from these snooty, uppity, just wealthy, unlikable people that lived off in Beverly Hills to just good, genuine people that care about the community that they live in and the people around them. Of the 3 seasons available on Netflix, this is the strongest one so far, and the show has actually gotten stronger and stronger as the seasons have gone forward. Maybe that's because the characters have become more and more likable as each season has progressed, but really the show has just sort of become tighter and more focused along the way as well, especially with its humor. And I appreciate that each season represents a very distinct sort of step forward for the Rose family. Each season has its own overarching theme for the family as a whole. Now, I know I haven't really talked about the comedy a lot in this show, but I do just want to bring up, it is a really funny show. It's quite hilarious. So as I mentioned before, the humor is very dry and it does rely a lot of those awkward deadpan moments, but I think it finds a very good balance between hilarious and cringy moments, and the humor itself is really something that tickled my funny bone. It's something that I enjoyed a lot personally. There are also some truly inspired one-liners in the show, lines that will just have you rolling on the floor dying in laughter.
Children, mindless bickering is a luxury we may no longer afford. You are blind to reality, and for that, I am most proud.
Now, I do have a few gripes with the show. There are definitely a few scenes and moments throughout the series that come off as feeling sort of insignificant and not serving any real purpose to the story. These scenes are usually put in place to sort of put in a forced joke or some sort of gag, but they don't really serve a purpose in terms of developing the characters or pushing the story forward or any narrative reason like that. They're mostly just there to try and put a joke into the show, and these moments and scenes would be forgivable if they were funny, but most of the time they're not. They just kind of happen and they're weird and awkward, and then it's on to the next scene and you're like, well, that was dumb. What was the point of that? It's almost like they included scenes of these characters' everyday lives, but they included scenes of just the really trivial, unimportant stuff on occasion because they thought it would be funny, but they're just not funny at all, at least not to me. There's also the Moira problem. Moira, what are we gonna do with you? The big issue with her is that of all of the Rose family, she is the one that has grown the least. While all of her other family members, you know, Johnny, David, Alexis, they've gone on to become decent, respectable, relatable human beings, Moira's kind of like the last holdout who's still just so completely stuck in her ways that she just can't seem to escape them. And even though by the end of season 3 she's starting to make progress, she still has a long way to go, and she just can be so annoying and unbearable sometimes. So I mentioned earlier how annoying and insufferable Roland as a character is, and I definitely hated him in the early seasons, but by the 3rd season, even he was developed to a point where I was kind of like, all right, he's not that bad. I mean, he's definitely obnoxious, but he's not a bad guy. I can't say that about Moira because she's still just awful and I kind of hate everything around her and she kind of needs to be smacked. I think the biggest problem with her is that nobody ever calls her on her crap. You know, she's just constantly going around and acting like she's better than everyone else. She's always full of herself. She's very self-absorbed and vain, and no one ever calls her on it. No one ever tries to correct her behavior. And so what reason does she have to change? She just never has encountered a situation where she has to face any consequences due to her actions, and she just walks all over everybody, and it gets really old. You know, someone needs to step in, or something needs to happen to her to make all of her awfulness sort of more palatable. She is still really funny, like easily one of the funniest characters in the show, thanks primarily to Catherine O'Hara's performance of her, because she embodies this awful, like, rich, liberal, white Beverly Hills person so well, who like thinks that they're making the world a better place, but really they're just annoying everybody with their stupid attitude. There also aren't really a lot of big emotional moments in this show. Much of the show has a focus on the smaller moments in life, those little things, because it's really a show about being thankful for what you have, even if what you have isn't all that much. As a result, an emotional roller coaster this show is not. It's not gonna be full of highs and lows. It's more like a leisurely stroll in the park, and occasionally you might like get stung by a bee or find a puppy, but nothing that's gonna be like, whoa, like over the top high or over the top low. Nothing like that. It's all very like even. Overall though, this is a very funny, quirky, and surprisingly deep show about people who end up falling off their high horse and just have to end up learning to walk with the rest of us. It might take a little while to get into just because, as I mentioned, the first season I do believe is the weakest season, but if you stick with it, you are going to be in for a treat. This is a wonderful little show about really funny characters, and you get to see them grow and become decent human beings along the way. You know, you say you can't polish a turd, but I think Schitt's Creek proves what's wrong with being a turd anyway. Thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you. So I know it's been a few weeks since my last video, and if you haven't seen that, be sure to go watch it because it explains why my sparse upload schedule has been happening this summer. Anyway, Schitt's Creek was a very good show, a pleasant surprise. A friend of mine showed it to me, and you know, I was a little iffy after the first season, but once you get past that, the show gets really, really good. It's an awesome show, great characters, great writing, great performances all around. Shows what you can do with a really low budget too. So definitely check it out, especially if you're a fan of like deadpan, sort of awkward, cringy humor. It's good stuff, really good stuff. Anyway, if you enjoyed this content, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below. You can also head over to Twitter and over to Facebook and follow me on there. And as always, if you want to know your flicks, you know where to click. Happy hunting, guys. I'll see you next time.